Title: Betrayal and Bloodlines. A family torn apart. After a long and arduous recovery from a life-threatening open-heart surgery, the man who once commanded power and respect in Port Charles returned home, only to find his life, and the family he held dear, in utter disarray. He had been in the hospital for what felt like an eternity, fighting for his life, while outside, the world he knew had been rapidly changing. Tracy Quartermaine, a formidable force in the family, had seized control of the family empire. Her rise to power was swift, and she wasted no time solidifying her hold over every operation, decision, and person who mattered within the Quartermaine fold. Now, fresh from recovery, his heart still tender, he stepped through the familiar doors of the Quartermaine mansion. The once majestic home, where he had spent countless nights strategizing and overseeing his family's vast business empire, now felt like a foreign land. The walls, adorned with family portraits, held the echoes of a past he could no longer recognize. Tracy had taken over, not just in name, but in every sense of the word. As he walked through the grand hallway, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over him. He had built this empire, had fought for it, bled for it, only for Tracy to waltz in and take control. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Tracy was not just controlling the Quartermaine's business affairs, but she was actively dismantling the family's legacy, shifting allegiances, and casting aside the old guard like yesterday's news. But he was not a man to be easily defeated. He was born of the same bloodline that had thrived in the shadows, built on manipulation, strategy, and resilience. He had a family to protect, and now, more than ever, he needed to take back what was rightfully his. With steely resolve, he knew that if he were to reassert his position at the helm of the Quartermaine Empire, he would need the loyalty of his brothers, men who had once stood by him, and whose allegiances had been strained by Tracy's aggressive tactics. But loyalty, he knew, was not something that could be bought or demanded, it had to be earned. And so, he made his decision. He would summon his brothers, Luke, Nicholas, and even the estranged ones, to stand with him. Together, they would silence the growing influence of Tracy's faction and reclaim control over what was theirs. The battle for the Quartermaine legacy was far from over, but the first step was to reunite his fractured family. In a cold, calculated move, he sent his trusted men to investigate a string of incidents that had occurred while he was incapacitated. His mind still raced with the unsettling realization that there had been a deeper, more sinister plot at play during his time in the hospital. The bombing in the attic, the mysterious injection he had received in his veins, these were no accidents. Someone had been actively trying to kill him. And all signs pointed to Sidwell, a low-level but ambitious nurse who had worked at the hospital where he had been treated. Sidwell, who had always played the part of a loyal employee, now seemed to be at the heart of a much darker conspiracy. The investigation was set into motion with ruthless efficiency. His men scoured every inch of the hospital, searching for any evidence that would tie Sidwell to the bomb explosion in the attic, an explosion that had nearly cost him his life, not to mention the lives of others who had been caught in the blast. The evidence was scant at first, but as the investigation unfolded, secrets began to unravel. Sidwell had been involved in more than just the bombing. She had been actively working to poison him with a lethal injection, ensuring that his recovery would never come to fruition. The more his men uncovered, the more horrifying the conspiracy seemed. Sidwell was not acting alone, but had been working under the orders of someone much more powerful, someone hidden in the shadows, pulling the strings. It was clear that Sidwell was just a pawn, and her involvement in his near death was part of a larger, more insidious plan to rid the Quartermaines of their rightful leader. The only question that remained was who, within his own family, could have orchestrated such a betrayal. As the investigation deepened, tensions within the Quartermaine family reached a boiling point. His brothers, who had once been his allies, now found themselves caught in a web of lies, deceit, and suspicion. Some of them, like Luke, were more inclined to stay on the sidelines, wary of getting caught in the crossfire. Nicholas, however, was eager to jump into the fray, eager to reclaim his own place in the family's hierarchy. But even Nicholas could not escape the growing sense of treachery that hung in the air. His mind swirled with 1,000 possibilities, each darker than the last. Could it have been Tracy who had orchestrated the attack on him, seeking to eliminate the one man who stood in the way of her total control? Or was there another force, lurking in the shadows, with a much more personal vendetta against him? The answers were elusive, but one thing was certain: he would not rest until he had uncovered the truth, and until he had taken back everything that was rightfully his. In the days that followed, he gathered his family together in the grand study, a room that once symbolized their unity and shared purpose. Now, it felt like a battleground, with each person at odds, questioning the loyalty of the others. As he sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by his brothers, his mind was set on one singular goal: the downfall of Tracy Quartermaine and the restoration of his family's power. The stakes were higher than ever. Not only was his life on the line, but so was the future of the Quartermaine legacy. The battle for control of the family empire had only just begun, and the lines between friend and foe had never been more blurred. But for him, there was no turning back. The time for talking was over. Now, it was time for action. And when all was said and done, only one Quartermaine would remain standing at the top. In the weeks that followed, the investigation into Sidwell's betrayal grew more intense. Every lead, every clue, pointed back to a shadowy figure, someone whose identity remained hidden behind layers of deceit. As the family's secrets unraveled, so did the facade of loyalty that had once bound them together. Betrayal, like a cancer, spread through their veins, and no one, was safe from the fallout. And so, with a fierce determination, he set his sights on reclaiming his throne. It would not be easy, and it would not be without bloodshed. But in the end, the Quartermaine Empire would be his once more, and those who had betrayed him would pay the price. But there was one final question: when the dust settled, who would be left standing? Would it be Tracy, with her iron grip on the family, or would he emerge victorious, having crushed the traitors who had sought to bring him down? Only time would tell, but for now, the battle was on.